Welcome back to the Fleeting Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Leffler, the armchair attorney. Episode 69, I think, something like that, where we keep track, or the machine keeps track. I just talking to the camera with the microphone. There's some great stuff to talk to you all about today. Lots to catch up on, so we're going to get right into it. And of course, we appreciate you tuning in to learn more about what's happening in your supply chain. It's not just mine. It's not just someone else's. It's yours. This is your supply chain. It's also your country, your democracy, if you're in the United States. And we'll talk about some interesting legal developments that are going on right now. And so let's get right to the show. As always, today's broadcast is sponsored by our friends at DAT, Dial a Truck DAT. Since 1978, DAT has been helping motor carriers find freight, and more recently, last couple decades, helping brokers get freight. Load boards are a quintessential part of the American supply chain. Once upon a time, there was actual boards in travel centers, and you'd go and you'd look at the board and you'd say, there's the load I'm going to do. This is a different world today. There's a lot more stuff going on. And to emphasize some of the innovations that are happening in our amazing industry, DAT has a promotion that I'm really excited to talk to you about. I'll put a little thing up you can take a look at. DAT has launched a new initiative. They're calling it Gear Up, where they're automatically upgrading carriers with DAT One load board accounts to the next subscription tier at no extra cost, no strings attached. That's right. If you are a motor carrier, you're a trucker, and you use DAT, your account's already been bumped. You have the new technology to take a look at. And that promotion ends on October 23rd. So all carrier accounts have already been upgraded and will remain so through October 23rd. On the 24th, everyone's account automatically reverts back to the lower level subscription that you're already paying for. You don't have to do any special things after that. You just go back to what you had before. That is DAT's Gear Up initiative. Very, very exciting stuff. And I hope you check it out. Of course, we couldn't do this without our partners. And so if we can help our partners, as our partners want to help you, we really encourage that. Now, the other thing I'm going to tell you about is the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference, September 30th through October 2nd, 2024. Right after this Gear Up promotion for DAT ends, you can go down to the Journal of Commerce Inland Distribution Conference being held in the Weston and Chicago's River North neighborhood, #Inland24. Why am I so excited about Inland 24? Well, I'm going to be speaking at Inland 24, and what I will be speaking about is non-competition agreements. Oh, yes, those things that we all know so much about at this point. Look, this is the update on the FTC's ban on non-competition agreements. There's a lot to catch up on. Earlier this week, the Twitter handle Unusual Whales, I love Unusual Whales, great Twitter handle. You should absolutely follow it, or X, yes, as I understand, it's a different name, tweeted about the ban on non-competes being upheld in a Pennsylvania district court. And in their tweet, they said, hey, everybody, essentially, the non-compete ban is going to go into effect. It'll be in September, and all of these non-competes are going to be gone. No, that's not what's happened. There is some caveats. There is some truth in the reporting. But as a lawyer, I want to clarify and qualify a little bit further. Let's do a quick little Wayback Machine. FTC back in 2023 announced a proposed rule to ban non-competition agreements. They had comments that went on for a long period of time. 26,000 people filed comments, or entities filed comments. And then in this year, January or so of 2024, the FTC put out its final rule that was going to ban non-competes. There was a grace period of I think 120 days, something like that. And it was going to go into effect. The actual ban would be in September of this year. And like we all anticipated, like I had been covering since the very beginning, there were some very powerful business interests that absolutely unequivocally do not want to see non-competes go away. About 1 in 5 working Americans, 30 million people, have a type of non-competition agreement. This contract prohibits you from doing a certain job in a certain area for a certain period of time. All of this is to drive the legitimate business interest of the hiring entity to prevent you from doing a certain thing. That's what they are. In a nutshell, it's a contract that says you can't do what you've been trained to do. Well, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was the first one to file a pretty big suit in Texas, and earlier in June, or maybe even early July, maybe in July 3rd, they got a ruling in that case that said that the FTC ban was not enforceable, illegal, unenforceable, ain't gonna happen. A lot to unpack there, but in a nutshell, the argument advanced by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others is that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, does not have the authority, doesn't have the power to ban a contract between workers and their hiring entities. That's what the Chamber of Commerce argued, and they won at that level. Well, in Pennsylvania, another case happened. Same basic set of facts. A tree care company sued the FTC and said, hey, we have 15 tree specialists, and they all have non-competes. And we think this ban that you're trying to propose is illegal, unenforceable. We're going to challenge it. Well, that district court said, oh, no. We actually do think that the FTC has the authority to ban non-competition agreements. And so therefore, Mr. Tree Company, you're going to go pound sand. This thing is going to happen. Well, we had this question earlier this week, and I'm going to answer this as I did earlier. What happens when federal district courts conflict? What's the answer? What do you do when two courts come to opposite conclusions based on the law? Well, the only thing you do, generally speaking, is you appeal it. You appeal to the court above them. See, the district courts are the lowest federal courts in our system. Their bosses, for lack of a better word, are the appellate courts. And the appellate's court boss is the Supreme Court of the United States. You can actually have the appellate courts come up with completely different outcomes based on the same set of facts. You can have a conflict where one circuit says yes and one circuit says no. It all gets settled eventually when it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States, if the United States Supreme Court decides to hear the case. We don't know if SCOTUS will weigh in, and we also don't even know yet what the appellate courts are going to do. So that case in Texas that had the U.S. Chamber of Commerce involved, that would get appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Whatever the Fifth Circuit does, it'll apply to all of the Fifth Circuit, but nothing beyond. Their power is only as far as their appellate reach allows them. If the case in Pennsylvania gets appealed, and I have no doubt that it will, it'll go to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and you could have a conflict among these circuits. It's important to note that this is just getting started. We will likely have dozens of cases across many jurisdictions, all coming up with different, slightly different outcomes as to what they think their rights are as it relates to what the FTC's power is. That's a lot of legal jargon to understand. Essentially, we don't know the answer yet. If you look at the tea leaves, and from time to time I read those tea leaves, I'm not encouraged. The Supreme Court of the United States is hesitant to allow federal agencies to have such broad power. And when we saw a case not too terribly long ago, a case called Loper-Bright, the Supreme Court granted certiorari. They entertained this case. And the one thing that they were talking about, the one thing that really, really mattered, was whether or not Chevron, the level of deference given to federal agencies when the agency interprets the statute that created it. Supreme Court said, no, we don't like Chevron deference. We don't think our courts should defer to a federal agency on a legal question of interpreting a statute. So what this tells you is that our Supreme Court may not see that the FTC has the authority to ban non-competes. That is what it is. If you don't like non-competes, do not despair. These things are still being attacked in a bunch of different ways across many different states. There's pathways for federal agencies to issue additional rules, maybe trying to ban them. The states can certainly try to ban them, and they've been successful in places like California. And then ultimately, Congress can act. Congress can always act if they so choose. And I think the removal of Chevron will give some more accountability to legislators to create rules that ultimately make sense for everybody. So that's the update on the non-competition space. Look, every day there's new things happening with this. Every single week we have new cases to examine. For you, dear viewer, who is watching this from home or listening to this through the podcast, understand that non-competes are probably not going anywhere. The best you can do is educate yourself as to what it is that you're signing. Hire a lawyer, have them look at it, understand what you're being restricted from doing. Ultimately, you are responsible for the things that you sign, even if you don't understand them. So it's important for you as an individual American to take the responsibility of reading what you're put in front of you and making the right decision for you and your family. That's the non-compete update. Man, I thought it wasn't going to take that long, but it kind of did. It kind of had to. I had to unpack it. Now, look, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I am about to welcome two of my favorite people in the supply chain space with the perspectives of brokers and shippers to try to understand a little bit better of what in the world is going on in this world of freight fraud, freight theft. I'm a lawyer. People come to me and they say, Matt, motor carrier is holding a load hostage. What should I do? And I'm like, you should probably sue them. Go call your lawyer. Go call the officers. And the officers say, it's a civil matter. We're not going to get involved. You got to deal with it yourself. Sometimes a motor carrier wants to charge some accessorials and they're like, I'm not going to give you the freight until you pay me my money. This is an interesting world that we live in. This freight market is by far one of the worst we've seen since 2008. It's been longer now. This freight recession has been longer now than the boom we saw from COVID. So all this is to say, a lot of stuff is difficult. And when things get difficult, I like to call in the experts. And my experts today, they are great. First, let me welcome TJ Knudson. TJ, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm great, Matt. How are you?
I'm living La Vida Loca. I am so excited. I've been on your program before. Now you're on mine. And I'm so excited to welcome one more person coming in right now, Tony Darnell. Tony, how are you doing, my friend?
Not bad. Good to see you again, Matt.
We are. So I got to start off by saying, okay, what is McClay's Logistics? TJ, what is McClay's? What do you guys do? What problem are you trying to solve every day?
So, McClay's Logistics, it is different. And so, I've been on a journey here to when you're looking for a new home, it's tough to do it that's probably the biggest challenge I found in this market, really. But Tony really hit it off with Eric Thornton, who's our senior VP out there, and met him out in Vegas and at a convention, and kind of turned me on to him. And I after my last stint, I was very big on not just finding a company that was going to pay the most, not just finding a company that had the most resources or anything, but the company that aligned with me morally. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, as I've gone in my career, I can do whatever it is that needs done. It's whether or not I can connect with that company and be and feel as though I'm a part of it and understood and listened to as much as I am when I'm recruited. Yeah. Because, you get recruited and it's, oh yeah, this, that, and that. Then you get in there and it's like, okay, well, that's not how it works. So Tony really turned me on to him, and Tony was going through a transition as well. And luckily I'm just, probably a top 5 sales guy in Northeast Indiana, 46706 zip code. And was able to convince him to come on board with me. I mean, he was already kind of contemplating it. So, and we went from there. Now, McClay's Logistics, right? So their headquarters, I guess you'd say, is in Ingersoll, Ontario. Okay. All right. So McClay's Logistics is in Michigan, in Detroit, Warren, Michigan. Yep. And then a lot of the McClay's transportation, which is the asset side, is out of there too as well. So Matt Schock runs that side. Mark Labros and Eric Thornton help run the logistics side. So they're just they're good people. They take on. There's nothing that they won't take on. They have educated conversations no matter what you do. If you've got a client or a customer that needs something done, we just have educated conversations with them about how, hey, you could go out and search for somebody who does that, but they probably got so many other people that do it too, that they may be bogged down. Let's talk about how we can develop a team around it. We've got people that are experienced in each realm, and as we grow, it's like they're not up for saying no. They're not going to say no, we can't do that, but they'll also say, hey, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it smart.
Yeah, well, that's a great point you bring up. Is that it takes decades in some cases to build a reputation and to have the integrity that you have what you do, and it takes a minute to destroy it. And so when you're looking for finding a place to hang your hat, I mean, in this industry, everyone says it's about relationships, and it truly is. It's about who you've gotten a chance to work with, who you've collaborated with, the value you've brought to them, and making that transition is never easy, but it can be very rewarding. Now, Tony, you were the shipper. You were the guy who everybody wants to talk to. And now you've gone onto the side of the transportation aspect of the business. Can you talk a little bit about your journey in getting into shipping and managing shipping departments into what you're seeing today on the more brokerage side?
Well, I'll tell you, I echo what TJ said here. I was always intrigued by it, but I never wanted to make the move. And then when I ran across Eric and I got to know him and built a relationship with him 4 years ago, here we are. And when the opportunity arose, I finally found a place, and I tell people this all the time, I finally found a place that does external commercial freight for me as a shipper the way I would want it done if I was that guy. Mm-hmm. So when the opportunity came, I jumped at the chance because it was really exciting to go, and with the prospect of knowing that our normal day-to-day operation is the way I would have wanted it done if I was directing them anyway. And talking to the team there, it's been so cool to sell what they do, because I know everybody, I used to get the emails, I get hundreds and hundreds of them. I think when I left Lippert, I think I was 4,000 or 5,000 in my folder.
I've seen like 10,000 emails. It blows my mind.
Everybody says the same thing. They sell you price. They sell you, I'm the best one you're going to talk to today. And you can read through the template so quickly and easily. It's not even funny, but to come to a customer and help them solve a problem, the problem that they don't even know they have, but I know they have because I've lived it, is you've got 30 providers. You use 4 or 5 of them and you only like one of them. Maybe.
Well, there's a good point you bring up, which is, the problem better than they do. Like you're not just.
He'll tell them that.
That's a good point. Exactly. You've been in the trenches. So what is it that you've found has been the biggest differentiator from your time at working with different brokers? What you do with McClay's today?
It's the service and the level of care. When a shipper such as myself was giving a load to an outside vendor, that's my job on the line. That's my reputation with my boss. That's my salesperson's promise to our customer, which is ultimately our revenue stream, that is literally on the line and in your hands to fulfill as an outside carrier, outside vendor, brokerage or asset, whatever. And knowing that, it makes it easier to sell that, because I can tell them, listen, dude, I know that your job is on the line. I know your professional career is on the line. Your own development and your own career is on the line. And I can help you with that. I have options I have stuff that I figured out as a shipper that can add value. I made a post about it the other day. There's ROI on a machine in manufacturing, right? It's easy, it's calculable, but there's nothing but the I in shipping. It's a necessary evil. It's that department that's a dead end job that nobody wants. Nobody comes up out of logistics. They may come from supply chain and purchasing, but nobody comes off the logistics side into senior management. Rarely, if ever.
Well, and what I love about that, if I want to touch on it for a second, was I remember talking to Tony, and this was before we went through the transition, and he said, I feel like, with our podcast and with what I do or whatnot, I give a lot of advice on how to sell. I give a lot of advice on how to approach shippers and whatnot. And he's like, I want to get paid for that. And he's like, I feel like I thought of it this way. It was like, if I bought cars right? If I purchase cars. And for me purchasing cars, I was just on a salary, right? And I wasn't going to be the owner of the company that I was going to purchase or anything. I wasn't going to move up. But I dealt with car salesmen every day. I dealt with car salesmen every single day for 30 years. And I know that they're making commission, yet I'm over here still just purchasing cars and being hammered because I have a budget and this and that and this and that. And then I know that these car salesmen are over here making money. There's a point in time where you go, I've dealt with them for 30 years. I know what they talk about, what they do, what I expect, what I want. Why wouldn't I just go over there and make more money? And it's not just about money too. I mean, like that one just what his decision was about, but that was the conversation that started it. Yeah. And I thought I was like, you're right on.
Well, to build off that, TJ, one of the things that kind of I find in people use the word Amazon effect in different contexts, but when I think about Amazon, what Amazon did in my mind was it linked the product with the supply chain that brings you the product, and that's the experience. Mm-hmm. And you're only as good as your supply chain. You're only as good as the people that help you move the stuff. And we all know that safely delivering freight on time and undamaged is difficult, even when things are great. And when weather's great, I mean, it's still hard, and it still remains one of the most dangerous jobs in America. But what I think, as Tony kind of alluded to, and you've talked about here, is that the experience of how you get that product from the manufacturer to the warehouse or the distributor or the retailer or to the shelf or to your doorstep matters. It matters in ways that are unique and profound to supply chain. So you've been in a couple different places, TJ. What has made McClay so compelling for you?
So to touch on that though, that Amazon effect, it had an effect on supply chain and logistics, because it wasn't about always being on time. It was the fact that when people ordered from Amazon, they were still happy whether it was late or not, because they had the tracking. They saw it.
Ease of doing business.
And they saw how it worked. They're like, okay, now it's at the distribution center in Columbus, Ohio. Right? I just drove by a distribution center in Cincinnati, or I know that those are only few and far between. Okay. So now it's got to get over here. So yes, it's late, but I can see where it's at. They're updating me on where it's at. And it's like, I'm understanding now kind of how it works. It left here, it went there, and now I'm the next stop. And so that became something that, was a big conversation for drivers, especially was trying to, me and Ingrid Brown, I've had some, I just love her so much.
I love Ingrid. Great conversation. This picture right here is from her vehicle. She took this picture, and I went to Walgreens and printed it off. It was in my baby's room before, but now it's in my office because I want to look at it.
So I'm apparently her trucking husband is what she says. Trucking married. But she would talk about how annoying tracking was and this and that. And I said, again, with what you said, the Amazon effect, I've never used that phrase before, but it makes sense because it's just something that sometimes is now required.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It is.
It became an expectation. So what was a nice to have became a condition precedent to doing business. Mm-hmm. I must know about my things. One of my favorite Amazon stories, and not a ton of people know this. So in a past life, I've always been a lawyer. Well, since 2010, I've been a lawyer, but I'm a trailer maintenance guy. I love trailers. And I was the largest provider of maintenance for Amazon when they were working with another company called FleetNet. And I maintained their trailers in Chicago and Atlanta. And
Hyundai? Great
absolutely. With those blue panels, they're almost impossible to source. Those blue panels were the bane of my existence. But what I found so compelling with them at that time was they were following like the FedEx Ground model of, we're going to own the trailers. We're going to have other people give power to it. And now you look today and power only, drop trailers. Like this has been the business for decades. And it's so cool to see it. Tony, now that you're over on the brokerage side and you're finding out like what this market's like, are you getting some more empathy for the brokers that were calling on you before? Do you see this now, the other side of the fence?
I do, but that doesn't negate the 99% of the garbage that I still would get. I mean, so I have a more empathetic view of that, but it still requires a genuine connection and a relationship built on trust. Because the Amazon effect,
his struggle is his bar is set so high. That's his only struggle, is that his bar is set so high that it drives him nuts, that he knows what he knows, and that all he wants them to do is listen to what he has to. If you could just get in front of him he'd be okay. And that's a lot of the good salespeople's problems. But yeah, that's what he struggles with.
I like to look at it. There's a poem that I have that you remind me of. It goes, if a task is once begun, never leave it till it's done. Be thy labor great or small, do it well or not at all. And I think we live in an industry that is, I'm not gonna say below average, but there's some room for improvement in the transportation industry. And I think that you bring this level of expertise to your customers because not only have you lived their problem every single day, but I suspect that the worst case scenario, like what happens when things go wrong, you've probably also dealt with that. And so I'm kind of curious, like now that in the industry, like a lot of stuff I hear in the media is, oh, freight fraud, freight theft, double brokering. First, I'll go to you first, TJ. What in the world is happening? And is it new, or has this been the way it's always been? And now we just have more eyeballs looking at freight fraud, freight theft, double brokering, all this kind of stuff.
Well, first off, I want to make sure I wasn't dodging your earlier question when I went on about Amazon and about why I joined McClay's. But I joined McClay's, like I said before, based on all those reasons, and the what made me successful, okay, and legit to start off. And I would say the way I was raised in the industry was the innovation, was the coming up with something crazy to make it happen. And that's what we did at Sorghum. Before we got too big, it was very much a thing where I would go into our owner, Eric Fortmeyer's office, and I'd say, hey, I got this issue or whatever. He'd be like, oh, just do this. I'd be like, wait, I can do that? He's like, you can do whatever you need to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'll back you. Like
the agility.
I've had experience. It's very innovative and very open. And that's how McClay's is as well. There isn't all these, they don't have these, they're not shoving money into sponsorships and, foundations and all these things that don't matter when it comes to actual employees and what they need to do to be successful. They're very open on even the resources they have. They're open to listen to what people say and what could work. And how they can keep adapting, and they're willing to transition as they go, which I think is pretty cool. But I'm sorry, what was the question? The freight fraud?
Yeah, I'm curious, because I hear so much. I mean, obviously McClay's got a great team, and you guys have built a great business so far. But now, for me, I'm not a freight guy. I love freight. I'm obsessed with it. You'll see me on Freight Broker subreddit or the Trucker subreddit. Like, I love this industry, but parts of it are kind of distant from me. So like double brokering, FMCSA, that's not something they get involved with as much. And so for me, I'm like, are we seeing the freight fraud, the freight theft, the double brokering? Is this new? Is it just exacerbated because of the market, or has it been around forever?
So here's how I look at it. When you go through some ups and downs in the market, what you get is you get people that it's like anything. I don't care if it's even non-competes or anything. It's everything that you do, you have to have some, what you said earlier, some education on. You have to be willing to put in a little extra effort. And everything is so automated nowadays, and everything is just handed to you. And I'm telling you, when you came in the market in 2020 and the amount of hiring that happened, there are so many people, and you see them even on LinkedIn that talk about how much they know and what they do and this and that. And everything was handed to them. The accounts were
all they know is good times. All they know is good times.
And at the end of the day, when the bad times are there, you look at Carrier Sure, like with Standard Gains, you see a lot of people complaining about it, right? And justifiably so. But a lot of it is all she did was try to say, hey, all right, that's what people want, is that simple way, something that's simple that just it throws it out there and you don't have to think. I wouldn't sell it that way because now that's what people want. And at the end of the day, carrier vetting, preventing double brokering, preventing fraud, it needs somebody to actually think and dive in and take that on. You can't just come in and no matter what you have, no matter how good it is, you have to look at things and be awake. You get busy, you get on top of stuff, you get rolling, and it's like, okay, cool, that's just easy to do, right? Oh, now my shipment's stolen. Well, if you don't have the resources and the people and the effort put in to understanding what it is that causes freight fraud and double brokering and carrier vetting and non-competes and things like that. If you don't put the effort into learning that and then taking those extra steps because you just want to be, I don't want to use the word lazy, but you just want to be, people will call it efficient.
Yeah.
You're going to set yourself up for problems. And that's in every case. And I think that's what we're seeing now is that everybody, you got to think there's always bad people lurking in the shadows. My dad always told me that. He's like, there's always bad people lurking in the shadows, people that want to make an easy buck, right? And if you're not on top of your game, they'll take advantage of you. And these people were sitting back there waiting, and then they saw, hey, wow, look at this industry. Everybody's just everything's been handed to them. They got everything easy for them. We could take advantage of this, and people let it happen. And then they want to complain about it. It's like, hey, at the end of the day, like those resources are great, but it's just like quoting a load. Like I don't just go to one source to quote a load. I go to like 6 different ones, and I try to prove each one wrong if I can, and then see it and get a middle ground on it. It should be the same thing, whether you're using carrier sure, 4-in-1, whatever it is. Like your TMS, your carrier vetting, team that you have. You should be pulling from all these different resources, not rely on one. And these people just took advantage of the fact that there's just too many people that are just taking the easy way out.
I usually don't bring up comments as we're going, but I have one from Truck Stop, and they're saying, love this discussion, #fraud prevention. Thank you, Truck Stop. We are very much aligned on the fraud prevention side. This is my thinking. Okay. I'm going to go to you with this one, Tony, because I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay. You want to eliminate double brokering. You want to eliminate fraud. Before deregulation, there was 18,000 motor carriers. Today, there's hundreds of thousands. Why would you not just go direct with a motor carrier and say, forget about this spot market brokerage thing. I'm just going to know my carrier. I'm going to know who I'm dealing with. Why isn't that one of the answers to this, Tony? And if you want to talk about any of the experiences you've had in that kind of world, I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
So that's the easy answer, right? Let's do it.
Yeah,
but the easy answer isn't always the best answer, right? Mm-hmm. The best answer is that guy has 2 trucks and can't run my 4 loads. So you end up having to go source more. So what you end up having to do is learn how to vet a vendor, right? And I spoke it in then last year. It was awesome. It was a great event,
loved you there. I loved watching. It was fantastic.
It was fun. I appreciate the photo too, by the way. What you have to do is you have to use all the tools available. You have to use carrier sure. You have to use carrier 401, trucker tools, Truck Stop. There's so many things out there available now in the tech space that you can use. Plus your gut intuition is going to tell you just as much as the data and tech. Use the data and tech, use the metrics and the KPIs and the tools that are available. But again, then this whole world comes down to relationships. And if you're not dealing with people that you know and trust, you're going to get burned. And sometimes you'll get burned anyways. But if you use all those tools and are doable.
Does anybody call the references anymore? I mean, you got to put references on a job application. You got to put them on when you come on as carrier, and nobody calls them. And people know that.
Yeah. I mean, this is like from my father's company. We were in business for 25 years, had a $5 million umbrella policy, over 150 employees. Like I knew my customers knew who I was. And I think that the challenge today is, to your points earlier, is people are lazy. Like they don't want to speak to a human being on the phone. They want to do something digital. And every broker, in my opinion, to an extent, not every, but some of them want to just do enough. Just enough to get the load moved. And if something goes wrong, it's unfortunate. My advice, I would say not legal advice, but advice generally for shippers. I know many shippers who have gone the route and saying, oh, I'm going to bring transportation in-house and I'm going to work with motor carriers. I'm going to disintermediate the brokers. And then I say, have you ever heard of broker liability? And they go, what? What's broker liability? Oh, that's when a motor carrier commits an act of negligence and the broker can be held completely liable for that damages for making a negligent selection. They go, well, is there a cap on that liability? And the answer is no, there's not. So if you want to play the game of being your own broker, go for it. Just understand the risks that you have are substantial. I would also say one of the solutions for this brokering fraud thing might be more connected trailers. If you knew where the trailer was and knew the trailer very well, as opposed to just relying on the ELD or the phone app that the driver has, there's value in other data sources. So I think this is a solvable problem, but I don't know.
I will say that if you're a broker to really differentiate yourself, the cool part is that I started on the asset side, and really I was there. I feel like, now that I look at it, after 11 years, it would have been about half and half. But what I loved about it was that we had skybits. I mean, we knew where our trailers were. And, when you're a broker, all you get is the trailer, right?
It's the trailer number.
It's the tractor, sorry. All you get is the tractor tracking. Yeah. And not only that, but sometimes that tracking is only through somebody's phone. So did that guy switch trucks? Did he drop the trailer and grab another one? Right? Where's the actual freight at? Or are we just knowing where the guy is that was driving the truck that originally picked it up? And I think that's where you run into some of this fraud, some of this, you don't see it put on rail as much anymore, but I remember catching somebody back in the day that used to pick them up in California, running almonds across the PA. You know, they had one carrier every time that picked it up, put it on the rail, and there was one driver that went and picked it up off the rail and delivered it PA. And I had conversations, and I literally got the receiver involved to see who that was. I wasn't afraid to say, hey, I think they're putting this on rail, because I knew it. Yes, it maybe look bad, but the effort I was putting into catching them was like, hey, okay, well, yeah, this is an issue that's happening. At least he's being honest, and we're helping him find out. And we found out about it. You know what I mean? Like, we dove in on that. And I think if, you know, brokers were to step up and say, hey, and go to their shippers and say, hey, we will help, you know, maybe even split the cost. You know, let's run some numbers and see what, you know, what you've had, you know, freight claim wise or freight fraud wise, and maybe even split the cost on getting some geofence, some things that we could put on the pallets. You know, when you load them on, that would differentiate you from so many different people. And then and it also differentiate you from the fact that this is why we only use carriers, why we don't use brokers, right? Make yourself in more in that carrier space, but people don't get that experience a lot of times. It's something that's why I try to teach as much as I can, because if you know the carrier side, it makes brokering that much easier, because you know how to separate yourself and do the things that they actually want.
Let me tell you something else real quick. Man, I love the rail. The rail is great, but the rail doesn't go door to door. And packaging is a completely different beast with harmonic vibration of the rail versus the truck. You are going to have completely different outcomes for packaging and load securement on a truckload versus rail car.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about that.
The harmonic vibration of a train ride is devastatingly bad to freight.
Well, I mean, in this
unless
market,
you know about that and prepare.
But does the suspension change? Like if you do air with air ride, wouldn't matter because you wouldn't have any air from the truck. So that's an interesting. I never even thought about that, Tony. Well, I was going to say what TJ was mentioning about Skybits before was, you know, when Skybits came to the market, they were saying essentially, hey, we'll tell you twice a day where your trailer is, and people were like, that's magic. That's insane. And when you start to measure something, then you can manage it.
Yep.
And today, I still believe it's less than 2/3. It's like maybe a third of all trailers have any tracking at all. But if you look at the modern systems like Philips Connect or some of the BlackBerry devices or Spirion or even Skybits, they've upgraded a lot of their stuff too. You can know about that trailer every 4 minutes. You can do so much more with the connected ecosystem. So I'm bullish to think the connected trailers may be one of the ways we help offset this, because the retailers, they all know about theft. They call it shrink, and they lose billions and billions and billions of dollars a year with shrink. So shrink is just even way, way bigger than the freight fraud and theft we see here, but it's still a problem that they have to.
And if you don't have that, so say you're a broker and you can't get access to the trailer. Those are, again, the extra effort is what's going to differentiate you.
That's right.
So do you know the trailer number? Okay, yeah, you got to get the trailer number just because you have to have it. You got to put it in TMS. But how often when you actually are looking for updates, do you ask what trailer they have on them? Right? Do you look when you go with the carrier, when you give them a load, where their yards are? Do you ask them, where are your yards at? Oh, that's funny because Elk Grove Village is right in the route that you're on.
I had a shop in Elk Grove. It was a great place.
Start asking questions. Do you drop trailers? Do you exchange trailers? Is this going to be the same driver? These are just questions they don't ask.
Yeah.
And then they get mad because it gets stolen, or they don't know where it's at, or they maybe even assume it's stolen when it's not, or it does get stolen. And those are the loopholes that allow it to be stolen, because you're not asking the right questions. If you don't have the resources right in front of you, ask the questions and be proactive out in front of it, and understand that could really save you a ton by knowing the trailer number, asking every single time what trailer is on, when you talk to the driver, making sure you know where their yards are, whether or not they do. And if they do, they'll probably tell you, and you'll be okay with that. Be like, okay, well, who's the next driver that's coming on? They'll be like, okay, the next driver, because some dispatchers don't even think about it. They're like, okay, well, they trust themselves, so they don't think about telling you, but maybe you should ask who the next driver would be that picked up that trailer, because it's going to be in a secured yard or whatever.
What I love about this, TJ, is like you clearly know this business. Like my dad was a roadway guy back in 1976. That's when he first started this industry. He was a night supervisor in Chicago Heights, managing union mechanics, and he went to Dallas. He was in California, and then he started his company in 91 as a maintenance provider for a division called Roadway Package System, RPS. RPS eventually became FedEx Ground. So we were the largest provider of maintenance for ground for 20 some odd years. And so like the thing is that this industry, these problems are not new. Like I cannot emphasize enough. Nothing is new. I mean, there's some things that are kind of novel. The technology to solve the problem, sure, that's novel. But those problems of visibility and understanding the operational pathways for the shipper, those are really important things to know. And clearly, by just how you've outlined the way you would question a customer or prospect of, okay, let's understand exactly what we need to do so we can be prepared for the worst case. Because one thing about supply chain that I think everyone can agree with is the worst case scenario is not a possibility. It's an eventuality. And once you understand that the worst case is going to happen, you're in good shape. So Tony, tell me about like the world of the shipper. Like if you deal with brokers who have things fall apart, what is the difference between what McClay's does when things go wrong versus what you've seen in the past that people haven't done great jobs with?
Proactive communication. I used to send out, I've told this story 100 times. I used to send out a single sheet called carrier expectations to everybody who ever got a load from me, no matter what plant I was at or wherever. And it would have a aerial view of the plant that they were picking up at, where to go, what the docks were in the door, because that matters to the guy showing up. Because I've been the guy showing up, and that's why I made that. And then I said, I want to know the morning of or the night before what truck is coming. Because if you're brokering the load and 5 guys show up at my shipping office at the same time, I don't know what to put on who. A lot of times there's a language barrier. Sometimes the driver doesn't know the broker that he's working with because the dispatcher does, but the driver might not. And when these 4 guys show up at my office at the same time, all looking for their loads, and they want to get loaded quickly, and we want to help them do that because we want to become a shipper of choice. Well, having that information at my fingertips, I can write on the bill of lading, McClay's Logistics, but they're also going to tell me the carrier that's actually going to show up with truck and trailer number and the driver name. I don't want to have to ask for that. It just needs to be proactively provided. And that's what we do. And I know that sounds like super basic, but nobody does that. I'm telling you.
It's the blocking and tackling. It's necessary.
Yeah. Nobody does it. And it's not difficult. And it's are you doing the bare minimum to get by and to get the load and to make a commission? Or are you doing the level of service that you create a value and a relationship with where people want to work with you?
But it's the difference in accountability. So, hey, why does a shipper require all these things for us to get their freight? However, I'm a broker and I have freight, but I only require a small amount for the carriers to take my load. Why is there a difference there? I remember changing my mindset. It's why me and Tony have been such a good team, because you just said, oh, TJ, you sound like you know a lot in the industry. I know my section very well, but I'm calling Tony all the time and asking him, hey, what would you think? What would you think from this angle? What would you think from this side of things? And he's calling me sometimes, especially now, saying, what do you think from this side of things? What do you think from this side of things? Always open to learning. And my biggest thing too, is I'm telling you right now, being on the asset side is so huge because dispatchers and drivers 85% of the time don't get along. That's what I dealt with more drivers calling me saying they want a new dispatcher or a dispatcher, because guess what? Dispatchers don't make the same commission. They don't make a commission. They want to come in, they want to make their salary, move on, and then they can set drivers up for failure. And so the communication, like what Tony just said, the guy could show up, not know his broker, but the broker may know the dispatcher. Well, guess what? You could, as a broker, you could trust the dispatcher. Okay, if you make a relationship with him, just like a shipper's not going to trust you until you make a relationship with him. But if I were you, I wouldn't trust the relationship between the dispatcher and the driver. Too many go through the dispatcher, get the load to him, whatever it is, and everything, and then, oh, okay, cool, this guy's cool. Well, guess what? The driver hates him. He's on a mission. He told his dispatcher he needed to get home to see his wife. He needed to get home for a birthday. The dispatcher ignored him or didn't give him all the information. Call the driver. Don't call them at 2 a.m. Matter of fact, a lot of times I would just shoot a text and say, hey, is it cool if I give you a ring here? Let's see if they're available, but talk to the driver and see what he's thinking. Where is he at mindset wise? Are you giving a load to a dispatcher who sounds so nice and great, but they're putting it on a truck with a driver who is pissed and is going to quit the next day and doesn't give a shit what your freight's doing? Well, guess what? You're setting yourself up for failure. So that extra step, and it even changed my mindset on when I would get, lanes that would come across, like, hey, can you price these lanes? My emails out to carriers looked exactly like when because I know my heart would start going fast and I would perk up when I'd see RFP, quote for request, first round or something in the subject line. You're thinking, oh shit, this is it. Or cool, they're sending me it. I would have it late. I literally took, I think it was Ryder and a couple other ones that would send those things out. And I took like how they would label it and how they made it look very professional.
Yeah,
and I have even more than one round to where it was like, hey, and then Brandon Bay, who's out doing his thing, you don't see him as much anymore, but I was telling you, the Schedule A contract. A Schedule A contract with a carrier is, I'm going to agree to this rate. Now, you have to agree to this rate and these service requirements. This isn't a contract in which you can't break it. We can't haggle because it's not like a legally binding thing. But what it does is it protects you because I'm saying I'll do this, and it protects me because you're saying you do that. And when you have that in hand, that means you're talking to not just a dispatcher, but maybe the ops manager, maybe the owner of that company. And they're thinking farther out than just one load at a time. And so when you get in that mindset of what a shipper does, and I learned all that from Tony too. I mean, a lot of it was just translating that to how you're dealing with carriers. The amount of freight fraud, theft, double brokering would drop dramatically. It just comes down to education, and are the managers teaching it? You can't put it on these kids that they're just putting asses in seats. You know what I mean? You got to put it on the people that are teaching them.
That's a great point. I mean, managing expectations is such a critical part of this business. And just as much as like the dispatcher and the driver may argue, the battle between like the dispatcher and the maintenance providers are also just as vicious. It's an interesting space. Now we have a question. I'm going to bring this up on the screen from Sam Martinez over at Redwood. Sam asks, what are about the size and scale of the brokerage and who are the right customers are? Requirements to do business vary drastically, and interested to see what your guys' views are. So what do you think about the requirements that shippers are putting in place for brokerages? And like, what is the right customer? How do you approach that?
At the end of the day, I really think, my take on that is it really does have to be a fit. And I think that's a conversation that you can have that sometimes opens up even more doors. But very few shippers have people come to them and say, hey, I'd like to know, now that we're in, I know that, first of all, it takes research right off the bat. Mm-hmm. Like it takes research ahead of time. But then you can have that conversation with them where it's like, I don't want to come in and take all your freight. I don't want to start huge. I don't want to set myself up for failure. I don't want to set you up for failure. You know what I mean? Let's start small, see where things are, and let's work from there and grow from there. That way that we're all on the same page and everything that we're doing, our team, our SOPs, everything that we do is built around your freight, right? We start with 1 or 2 loads, 1 or 2 lanes, but it does come down to, can your company afford sometimes the insurance that shipper's going to require? Do they have a team that can actually push and do that? Can they afford to take losses? I know some companies that can't afford to do that, and then some that actually benefit from maybe right off the bat taking losses. I know when we first started with Walmart, I think it was Walmart, it was 20,000 or something we were losing a month. That turned around within 2 months and we were making 80,000 a month. Yeah. So it's like, but can your company do that? And my biggest thing right now is in this market, everyone wants to push, let's go land the big dogs. Everybody's going after them.
Yeah. As they are in every market.
If you really think about it, if you were to start a brokerage, go online right now and find any book or anything on Amazon or whatever that you could find that says starting a freight brokerage. What's the first thing they say? They say start in your own backyard. Go meet with the Chamber of Commerce. Go to local meetings.
That's right.
Go to local factories. People like dealing with somebody that they're close with because they're getting bombarded by all these people that are in Chicago or wherever it is, and they're all just fresh out of the market. Tony's had great success with that.
Yeah. People do not do business with businesses. People do business with people, even if there's different.
Right now, the other thing that we got spoiled on was we stopped having those in-person meetings. And if you don't press the flesh, is what I've always told, they don't get to really know who you are. Number one, at the end of the day, you're kind of putting them on the spot. So they have to answer you. You don't have to sit around and wait for them to answer your call or email. Number two, you could shake their hand and they can understand your body, mechanics and your mannerisms and and how you act and how you're, what you actually have to say. Did you research how long did it take you to write that email? Or can you actually say it in person while you're standing talking to me? Right? How much knowledge do you have? And you have the balls to show up to a shipping factory, to a dock, and walk in, and you know what I mean? Like those are things that matter in this market. And when people talk about how bad the market is, everything's out there. It's just whether or not you're really willing to get your ass out of your seat and go do it. And that's what it has to come down to. It may get to the point where you can keep your ass in your seat and make money again. But right now, you got to do what you got to do, and that is where the opportunities are.
Here's my question. I'm gonna build off this, and there's some great comments from our friends John Radvansky and others. I can't bring them up because we're getting close on time, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on something. So I'm going to paint the picture. Every single year, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance does this thing called International Road Check, and they do a blitz. They inspect vehicles. They say, okay, this is what we're finding. And like clockwork, like about 20% of every vehicle inspected is out of service, unsafe at any speed. And as a lawyer, as a guy who's kind of like, I don't like risk, I asked the question, we know the operating cost of a truck. It varies, but it's around maybe $2.50 per mile, something like that. It varies on the freight you move and how you move it. But when we see sustained rates beneath the operational cost to run a truck, should we be concerned about that? Should we as a society, and this is a bigger, broader question, should we as a society go, man, that seems weird that these companies don't have the ability to afford the maintenance on their vehicles? I'm going to start with you, Tony, because you have a background as a shipper. That maintenance is important for a shipper, I imagine, and for anybody. But what do you think about this? What do you think about those numbers? Does it surprise you?
I've always had a fleet too, so I was always running a fleet as well, right? So we have our own fleet. We don't need your help, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I know that maybe they're trying to get back to the yard for maintenance and they want that backhaul, and I can get a market or below market rate. That's the ideal situation for a shipper, is to catch those on all of your lanes, but you're not going to do that. Reality says that you're not going to be able to do that every single time. So you got to know where the market is at any given point when you're looking for that too. And contract rates are great. You want to put in a 6-month or a 1-year contract. No offense to anybody that does that, but all that does is tell me that you don't have trucks when the market goes the other way, and it doesn't guarantee capacity. So I like the spot world just because I want today's market price and today's market rate. So when those rates go below operating cost, are you leasing a new truck? Are you driving a show cab?
Yeah.
Right. And it goes back to the comment I made with Cassandra 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever that was, when she found out who I was. You can go to Hot and Now, which is gone, unfortunately, and get a cheeseburger, and it's freaking 39 cents.
That's probably out of business now, Tony.
There's one left in Sturgis, Michigan. I went there a couple weeks ago.
Bless its heart. I love Hot
high school, baby. And then you can go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger for like $1.39 or whatever they are now. And
I think it's like $11 for a single cheeseburger at McDonald's.
Right.
Inflation.
You can go to Red Robin or Five Guys or whatever and pay $8 or $9, $12 or whatever for a cheeseburger. And then you can go to Ruth's Chris and you can get a cheeseburger there, but it's going to be $20, $25. Do all of those guys make money on that cheeseburger? Hell yes, they all do, because they're selling them at a profit. They're not selling them at a loss. They're not Walmart. They don't have loss leaders in their menu. So you gotta understand.
But their operating costs are different.
A benchmark is a benchmark, and it's a generality. It's an aggregate source of information that isn't true for this guy versus that guy. So if a guy willingly accepts a load that's below market rate, I'm not worried one bit about that, because he's making an informed choice as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think that they know the cost, TJ? Do you think most motor carriers know the cost to run their equipment?
They know their cost. They know their cost. But here's what it is. In today's world, okay, it's easy to use generalities as a scapegoat. You see it all the time. This general statement that's going around would serve me well to use that, because I didn't budget right. Because I bought a truck I shouldn't have bought. Because I got into an industry I shouldn't have got into. Because I don't know my operating
I want a
costs.
Kenworth, not a freight line.
Because there's this big thing going around, this general statement that rates are below operating costs, I can use that to my advantage. So I go bitch on LinkedIn and complain. Well, guess what? There's dudes that have been running trunking companies for 40, 50 years, and none of them are complaining. Why? Because they understand the ups and downs. They know the industry. What is the operating cost? This old guy over here who's been running forever has his truck paid off. His truck's paid off, and he maintenances it himself. He learned. He said, you know what? If I'm going to do this, because my dad did it, he taught me that get your truck paid off, learn how to change your own oil, learn how to do this, all this stuff you see Dan the driver. His tire seals, all the things that saves him money, but it takes effort. So he's not out complaining about rates being below market operating costs. You know why? Because his operating costs are lower. Why? Because he knows he's got to keep them low.
See,
but if I come in and I say, hey, you know what? Hey, the market's great, and I don't need relationships, so I'm going to go buy a brand new Volvo who just bent me over backwards to buy it. My payment's way too huge. I have no relationships. I'm going to get all my freight off DAT, and I'm making a ton of money because it's 2020. And then all of a sudden the market changes, and you're saying, oh, my God, the rates are below operating costs. Well, duh. And I'm sorry, but everybody's operating costs, your payment, your interest rates, your insurance, all listen, when you're on the asset side, you understand these guys will be on the road for 6 months. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I just bought a new Jeep. It's going to sit there for 6 months. Why buy the new Jeep? And they complain about how you don't have money. So at the end of the day, we can all have this generalized statement about it. But what it does, and I love it, is that it exposes the people that got into it, didn't manage it well, and now when I use this generalized statement to complain about it, well, guess what? It weeds them out. And if they're gone, they're gone. And that's
I'm going to push back a little bit because there's some there's a comment here from Data to Roadside. I'm always a big fan of him about what people know about operating trucks. And I'll say this, and this isn't like, I'm not pushing back too hard, but if we know on average about 20 to 23% of all commercial vehicles at any given moment on the highway, if you inspected them, they'd be knocked out of service. We know them to be bad. I was with the FMCSA at IANA, and I asked one of the leaders from FMCSA this question specifically. I said, look, we know that about 1 in 5 vehicles on the road is unsafe. We know this. And what is the FMCSA's perspective of this? Is this good? Is this the outcome that we should want as a society? And they said, look, our belief is the vast majority of fatalities in trucking are revolving around the driver, the hours of service, the drug and alcohol, whatever. It's not about the asset. The asset doesn't bring the accident. My thing is, and this is like my lawyer hat on, if I want to sue a trucking company, the first thing I'm going to ask about is your maintenance records, your maintenance program. Because if I can prove, I can demonstrate you don't know what you're doing with your stuff, I can make this a whole different lawsuit than Johnny had a bad day as a driver, and be much more along the lines of this motor carrier knows the expectation. They choose not to do it. And that's why the jury, should punish them. So I guess my question is not necessarily the rates aren't enough to justify the maintenance, because you're right. People can maintain things totally different. Even an example I'll give is I worked with a major parcel company, and their cost per mile on trailer maintenance was like 12 cents, which is bananas. It should be really like 3 cents a mile or less, but 5 cents a mile is probably fair. But the reality is, like, people don't know how to maintain it. So my question, I guess, back to you, TJ, is should we feel comfortable as an industry knowing that 1 in 5 vehicles isn't safe? Like, is this, yeah, that's the same way.
And I think, again, another scapegoat is, FMCSA or whoever it is comes out and says that a lot of the accidents are caused by just drivers and hours of service and whatnot. But see, the thing is, how do you quantify that? How do you really get the right statistics? How many accidents are caused by giant tire treads on the roadway? Right? How many accidents are caused by a tractor trailer that's pulled over on the side of the road and you got to change lanes real fast?
And the distracted driver
responsible for that. He's not going to be held responsible because he blew his trailer tire. He's not going to be held responsible because he's on the side of the road. However, it did cause an accident because he couldn't take care of his stuff. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, are you an owner-operator or an owner or an operator or both? So where are you at? Who are you signing up with? Are you signing up with a company that has the resources to help you not only maintain your equipment, but teach you how? Or are you ready to be an owner-operator? Because if you're not ready to be an owner-operator, you got to know. If you're going to be one, then you got to know how to maintain your stuff.
It's a tough business.
And you're causing more accidents than you think.
I think, like, one of the things I've always found with really good owner-operator fleets, they would put out like a maintenance escrow account. So every bit of revenue they took in, they would say, okay, this portion of my money is not my money. This portion of the money belongs to my truck and my trailer, and I'll take care of it.
And there's tools out there too. Like the comment said, owner-ops don't know their cost of maintenance. They don't know their cost of operation. You're right. But Carrie Jablonski with Trucker Tools, and there's so many other things out there. This is unsolicited plug for her, but I came up with this idea, and I'm like, guys, I want to help drivers pick their loads, help go where they want to go at a favorable rate, because guys want to go to a certain place and they don't care, and they'll take a rate that is way less because they want to go X instead of Y. And I wanted, how can I quantify that and sell it? I go and I pitch it to a couple of industry veteran guys that I trusted their opinion on. They're like, oh, that's trucker tools.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Carrie's good. Carrie's good people. I got to get her on the podcast at some point.
Right. There's tools out there that owner operators can take advantage of and learn from and use to their advantage.
At the end of the day, it's money management. And this last thing right here, because I know that they put money in escrow, and I've had every other day a driver asking to get the money out of their escrow to use for things because they couldn't manage their money elsewhere, and now they don't have money for maintenance. So
that's right. Well, we are at the time. I'm going to say goodbye to both of you gentlemen. TJ, great to have you on the program. Tony, great to see you again, my friend. If you guys stick around after I do the quick sign off, I'll have to chat a little bit more, but you guys have to go. Get out. All right, everybody. That's it. Let me press a couple buttons. There it goes. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Fleeting Conversations. Look, this supply chain, this logistics world is not going anywhere. The problems that we see are evolving, but they're not new problems. Having people like TJ and Tony who have the experience of not just asset-based motor carriers, brokerage, and shipping helps us better understand what we can do to mitigate the risk. As always, I cannot thank my friends over at DAT enough for their support of the broadcast. Look at that. DAT, dial a truck. Look at that pallid bust of Apollo. That arm. There it is. There he is. And of course, this is brought to you by the Floating Disembodied Head. Floating Disembodied Head. Ask for it by name. If you're a motor carrier and you have a DAT subscription, you are a part of Gear Up. Your system, your license, your thing is up the next tier, and that will continue until October 24th. October 23rd, you get all this great new value to discover what DAT has to offer. And I hope to see you all at Inland Distribution Conference coming up in Chicago, end of September. As always, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. If you find this useful, interesting, please share it. Please subscribe to the podcast. It'll be in the notes. As always, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. We did it. Now I got press